Hey everyone, my name is Jack. Welcome back to the channel. I cover a variety of topics as they relate to real estate, investing, personal finance, and all that sort of stuff. So if you like that sort of content, be sure to have a look around the channel. And if you like what you see, be sure to subscribe. But since yesterday was actually my very first anniversary with my loving wife, Emily Ann, I thought I'd use this video as an opportunity to talk about how to save up for a wedding and, more importantly, how to merge finances as a couple. Because it can be very intimidating approaching both of these issues. So I thought I'd at least break it down and hopefully give you some useful tips for approaching this if you're new to this sort of life or if you're trying to save up for a wedding. And if you're already married and you've already gone through all this, well, hopefully you can still take away some tips for saving up for larger purchases, since a lot of these fundamentals apply to all sorts of areas. Now, it kind of goes without saying, but before you actually start saving up for a wedding, you definitely got to know that this person is the one, because you're going to be marrying certain elements of your life well in advance of actually getting legally married on your wedding day. I'm of the philosophy that on your wedding day, not much should really change. You should have a great time. You should have a very fun wedding, a ceremony if you're doing that. That's all great stuff. But really, the fundamentals of your relationship should be well established beforehand. And in my opinion, this should include your finances. You should have some financial footing together before you actually move into a wedding and before you actually start saving up for that wedding together as well. But how do you actually approach this? Maybe you're not comfortable with sharing your finances with another person because chances are you've never done that ever in the past. One of the easiest ways to try and get the ball rolling with merging finances with another person is to open up a joint checking account or a joint savings account. That's exactly what my wife and I did when we were nearing the end of college. We knew we were going to be getting married at some point after college, so we decided to start saving for our wedding then when we were making a little bit of money on the side. But my wife was definitely uncomfortable with the idea of sharing finances with someone else. It's not something that she had really given much thought to. Me being very financially oriented, I was thinking, how are we going to save up for a wedding? And I thought this would be the best way to get both of us involved and also to actually get comfortable with merging our finances, because it is a big step. So we set up this account for one purpose at the time, and that one purpose was to save up for the wedding. All money going into that account would eventually be used towards our wedding. Now you can set up some sort of quota, I suppose, or take a percentage of either person's income and promise to put it into this account, but it's really up to you and your significant other for as to how you're going to do that. But definitely have that account ready to go and start contributing money into it slowly or quickly if you're ready for it. Since both of you will have full access to this account, not only will this be a great exercise in trusting the other person, but it'll also start to merge your finances together and you'll get more comfortable with that over the long term. Now you might do this for a number of weeks, a number of months, putting a little bit of money in. It could be as little as $10 per week, maybe even less. Just a little bit of money to get the ball rolling and to start getting comfortable with this whole process. Once you're actually ready to start looking at the logistics of the wedding, aka the date, the venue, and the general location, then it can be time to start ramping up your budgeting numbers when it comes to putting money into this wedding account. I'm not going to give you a specific guideline for as to when you should definitely have a venue picked out, but definitely have a budget in mind so that when you're actually saving, it's not going to be super stressful leading up to it. Because the goal here is to systematize the saving and spread it out over a long period of time. That's really the case with most saving. You want it to be very mindless and easy to actually get to. Ideally, you'd have something like a year, maybe 2 years, depends on how long your relationship's been going and obviously how much money you're making as well. But if you have that amount of time, you'll have adequate time to actually start saving up for a pretty sizable wedding depending on your area. Now I'll give a few tips on actually picking a venue and keeping costs under control, because it can be very, very easy to drastically overspend on a wedding, even though, yes, the day's supposed to be special, but the marginal value of picking a $100,000 venue over a $30,000 venue is not really that much in my opinion. What really matters is that you actually bring the people you want there and you have a good time with all those people, which you can do in quite a few different places, and you don't need to be at the top of the Sears Tower in Chicago. I don't even think they do weddings up there because I think that's where all the mechanicals are, but I guess they could probably charge a pretty penny if you wanted to have a wedding at the very top of the tower, even though it's just a mechanical room, but I'm sure they could charge an easy 50 grand or more for it just to book the venue because it's so unique. But you'll probably find that in a lot of big cities. The bigger the city, the closer you get to the center of that city, the drastically more expensive venue costs are going to be because cities are expensive. So you should know where you're going to get married in general. So for me, it was in Chicagoland, but you don't have to look in that big city. You can go out to the immediate suburbs, and all of a sudden you'll have drastically cheaper costs for basically everything, but you'll still have a nice venue to use. So that's what we did. Instead of doing Chicago, we did the close west suburbs that were just one neighborhood over basically from Chicago itself, and it worked great. Not only were we able to save a lot of costs, but we also had more options for hotels and parking, which can be very expensive as well for your guests. So keep your guests in mind if you're going to be having a larger wedding especially. Now I know a lot of people would argue, oh, you only get married once, it's time to splurge on the wedding. Sure, you can think that, but if you have the money for it, go ahead, but the chances are you probably don't, and I never believe it's a good idea to fall into debt to throw a party, basically. If you're really into parties, you don't have to stop at your wedding. You have your wedding, and that's a great party, but if you really wanted to throw a big party later on, start a charity or something and do a big fundraiser event and throw a big party there and raise money. Then you're doing two great things. You're having a lot of fun and you're raising money for some cause. So you don't have to stop at your wedding if you're trying to have big parties all the time. And frankly, I hope your life doesn't peak at your wedding. As fun as it should be, please just remember, this is one day in your entire life. But anyways, once you have a location and an approximate venue budget picked out, you can actually start putting a hard number on your savings goal. You'll know that your wedding will be $20,000 to $40,000 or something like that. Or if you're really going lavish in an expensive area, maybe you can get up to the $100,000 level, but you'll have a more firm number to actually start going for. But once you have that target number in mind, you take that target number and subtract whatever you've already have saved up in the wedding account, and then you divide that number by the amount of months left, and that's the monthly savings goal that you're going to have to need. Now, you should definitely overshoot this savings goal, because you never know when a last-minute expense is going to come up, or hey, if you have a big pandemic-related expense that's not refundable, that you need the money for anyways to cover something, you have a sort of cushion for whatever the problem ends up being. Now, if you have a W-2, one easy way to automate your savings is to just have a portion of your paycheck go to your joint bank account where all your wedding savings are. If only one of you is working, then you're going to have to shoulder all of that burden, but the other person hopefully would pitch in as well, even if it's just working a side job, depending on whatever your priorities are. Maybe one of you's in school, whatever the situation happens to be, just realize you're both going to have to meet this goal in some way, so find a way to do it. And that's really part of being a couple. You guys are a team, and hopefully you're working together towards a common goal. In this case, this first common goal for your finances probably is saving up for this wedding. If you're already living together, then it's even easier because your expenses are already shared, so you have some more savings there. The whole point of this, though, is to work backwards. You know that you're eventually going to have your finances merged in some capacity, and you also know that you're going to have to spend all this money on a wedding. So you take the approximate wedding budget that you think you're going to have, and then work backwards. Divide that by the amount of months left, and that's the monthly savings goal you have to reach and put into this joint account. As you contribute money, you'll both get more comfortable with having this account open where both of you have free access to it. And again, like I said, you'll hopefully build trust as long as no one breaks it. And if someone does break their trust, it's better to figure that out before the wedding. Now, a quick side point about having joint bank accounts as a couple, you should at least have one, because you're definitely going to have shared expenses, and you're definitely going to have these things like weddings that you should both be contributing towards, and that way you can both also keep each other accountable for contributing to that account if that needs to happen. But you shouldn't lose all of your discretionary spending. So what my wife and I do, and what I think really most couples should do, if not all of them, each person has their own discretionary spending account, and all of your money initially goes into a pool, and then each of you get a percentage of that thrown to these discretionary accounts that either person can use for whatever you want. So for example, let's say Emily Ann and I make $100,000 in a year. Each of us would get 1 or 2% of our total income thrown into our discretionary account that we can use for whatever we want without having to ask for permission from the other person, so long as it's not illegal or something ridiculous. That's a way to maintain some independence, even though you're becoming a one joint entity. That's really what marriage is legally, and you have your finances in that arrangement as well. But this will allow you to have a little bit of fun on the side. Obviously, just make sure to keep things clean. But really, the central lesson here is that even though weddings can be very expensive, the point is that you want to have a backwards working plan where you figure out what you actually need to achieve and then break that down into little steps. Each month you have this savings goal, rather than looking at the whole big savings goal and being like, how am I going to fork over $50,000? If you break that down into many months, and you have, say, 10 months to go, now it's $5,000 a month rather than $50,000 all at once. So it kind of helps to break down your goals and then attack those smaller goals each month. It doesn't make it any easier physically, but it does help with the mental game of actually getting through goals when it comes to something like money, which can be very stressful. Anyways, that's all I've got for today. I'm just in an anniversary type mood, so I thought I'd at least mention something about planning for a wedding. But if you like this sort of content about personal finance, definitely leave a like since it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of my other content about investing, the markets, real estate, since I put out new videos every single week and I wouldn't want you guys to miss any of those. But until next time, take care.